Anacortes City Council meeting of December 11th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciak, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Carter. Mr. Young. Mr. Walters.
Can you do one more time, Mr. Walters?
Here.
Okay, we can hear you.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton.
I would like to move to excuse Councilmember Young from tonight's meeting.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Ms. Cleland McGrath to excuse Mr. Young. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
I would also like to excuse Mr. Carter. I think he's underway.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Cleland McGrath, second by Ms. Hubick to excuse Mr. Carter. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, next is announcements and committee reports. I've got a few announcements, so bear with me. But first, and the first announcement is I'd like to address the disruption of last week's council meeting, December 4th. And we sent out a press release from the city, but I'll highlight some of those things. So in recent months, there have been a number of incidents across the country in which public comment period of the city council meetings have been used to make anti-Semitic and racist statements in a process known as Zoom bombing. City of Anacortes Council meeting public comment period was disrupted by such statements at the December 4th, 2023 meeting. These remarks were made remotely over Zoom by those who had signed up for public comment under assumed names. So and they were incredibly gross, obscene, nonsensical, hateful, false, anti-Semitic. They were terrible. The City of Anacortes acted within the guidelines of the First Amendment and the Open Public Meetings Act, which considers public comment in local government meetings a limited public forum. The City of Anacortes allowed the first two speakers to speak for their allotted 3 minutes per policy. Audio connections to the council chambers were muted once the speakers began yelling racial slurs and anti-Semitic statement. Their Zoom connection to the meeting was then terminated per RCW 9A 84030, disorderly conduct. So, and I had planned tonight to follow that statement with reading of Resolution 2060 on equality and inclusion that was passed by the City Council in 2019 that rejects this type of speech. But I received a much better suggestion from Council members Carter, Cleland McGrath, and Hubick, and that was to pass a new Mayor-Council joint resolution as we have some new council members. So we've added that item to Agenda 7A. Also, as a result of the actions on the 4th, Councilmembers Walters has proposed an amendment to council procedures with regard to public comment that it currently is in the 7B position on our agenda. So,
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Walters.
would you like to entertain a motion right now to move that?
If you want to propose such a motion.
All right, given that the proposal is to affect the public comment period, I'd like to have our discussion on that and potential adoption of it prior to the public comment period. So I would suggest that Resolution 3141, amending the City Council's rules of procedure, be moved to item 4A on the agenda, making public comment 4B. Consider that a motion.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Walters and a second by Ms. Cleland McGrath. So by rule, that amendment is accepted. So 4A will be 3141. Okay, I've got a bunch of other announcements. Some good fun stuff. Skate park and pump track ribbon has been cut, and a lot of folks have been over there using those that great new amenity, the park system. I know I saw Ms. Cleland McGrath over there, and maybe another couple council members there. So that's open for business. Thank you also to the Parks and Recs Department for the Wonderland Walk held Friday and Saturday night. Great turnout, weather held on just enough for the community to show up and enjoy the event, and my dog was not scared. Thanks to APD, AFD, Public Works, and Parks again for a great parade of champions held this weekend. Fantastic turnout, hundreds and hundreds of folks out there to celebrate a number of state champs, Pee Wee football, cross country, and of course the 2A varsity football team that truly needed to be honored for coming from 0-9 record in 2018 to no varsity team in 2019 all the way to state champs. So tremendous accomplishment by that team, and really a positive example of teamwork and hard work. So go Hawks. And also, don't be worried, the Anacortes entry sign is not missing. In cooperation with the Downtown Alliance, the arch has been taken down for restoration. I'd like to thank Dakota Creek for their generous equipment donation and assistance, and we'll have that sign much improved and back up soon. Other fun stuff, participated with the 2 police and fire chief and the chamber judging gingerbread building contest. And I just wanted to make this announcement because I really wanted to name the teams that won because they had such good names. Third place was the Gingerbread Spice Girls that did a coastal theme, Terminal Velocity, upside down gingerbread theme, and then Up to Snow Good. So, but Gingerbread Spice Girls were the winner. Great names for the teams, and a lot of fun. Lighted Boat Parade, if you were looking for it on the 2nd of December, it did not happen because they moved it to the 16th of December at 6 p.m. The APD is coordinating an animal pet food and supply drive, December 15th through the 22nd. Donations may be left at the Anacortes Police Department or Pet Place Market. And then finally, I was going to do a really detailed R Avenue update because we know that construction is affecting lots of folks, and it is going well. But instead of doing that detailed update, I was just going to pass to council this really nice card we got from Fiddlehead School, because they're there right in front of the construction. And so folks from our Public Works and SRV Construction were out there. So thank you, construction workers, was the main theme of it, but I'll pass this out. So they think the project is going well. So again, appreciate the public's patience on that very large project that is more than just 30th and R roundabout. So it's an improvement of that corridor. All right, I think that was more than enough from me, and I will turn it over for committee reports, and the first one is the Planning Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Planning Committee met at 5 p.m. today, and it was the Planning Director, John Coleman, and Council Members Cleland, McGrath, Walters, and myself. And just a reminder to people, the Planning Commission is meeting Wednesday and having a public hearing to discuss code amendments that have been suggested, and we've received some public comments on those already, but Wednesday would be another opportunity to follow along and make comments. We discussed a potential multifamily tax exemption program and the necessity of learning more about it in order to decide what we'd like to bring forward. So talking with some local builders and developers to help determine what would work for them and what would make sense for the city as well. So that's ongoing. We also discussed our bonus height for small units. Currently it's 600 square feet if one is to take advantage of the bonus height incentive, and we talked about there have been questions about raising that a little bit to add for the potential storage space and make them more livable. So we'll be talking about that. And then we had a discussion about Sharp's Corner and what we can do there, and to do an analysis of the land and what is possible there given constraints of space, natural gas pipeline in any critical areas, and explore the idea of doing an urban village with a minimum density zone and what that would look like. So starting to explore that. And then we talked about a few line items in the budget. that I had some questions about, and some of that is for land capacity analysis as we work to update our comprehensive plan in the next 2 years and make sure we have capacity for enough housing for people, and especially at lower income levels. That was pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Port City Liaison Committee. And since I happen to be the only elected official that attended that meeting, both Port and council members had some conflicts. I'll do my best to report out. The Port reported that they plan on doing their search for a new director starting in the new year. They were advising us that they are going to have Kathy Pittis and John Petrus be the representatives to the Port City Liaison meeting going forward. The president of with the new the new electeds, the president of the port commissioners will be John Rundgren, vice president Sean Ottenbright, and secretary John Petrus. They talked about supply. Again, they've offered to the city the tables and chairs from the transit shed, and even more importantly, offered to store them for a time being until we figure out what we might need to do with that. We talked about when Market Street might reopen, but we're not exactly sure when that is. But more importantly, I think, hopefully I get the date right, but I think I wrote down July 1st for reservations for the new Port RV Park. And that's, but hopefully sooner than that they're going to finish up with that project. But they want to make sure everything's up and operating before they start renting out those sites. So that's what I had from there. And next up is 3C, Public Safety Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. We had our Public Safety Committee meeting on December 11th. It was myself and Chief Harris, Chief Floyd, and Mayor Miller. So I had them all to, I got to enjoy talking to all of them, asking questions. The big news is the fact that we are officially fully staffed by the police department. We have 28 commissioned officers. So that is pretty incredible. We still have the 5 additional positions that were approved from the levy that we will begin hiring for next year. But the fact that we are a department that potential police officers want to come to with no signing bonuses or anything else, just the quality of professionalism is a really big deal. So well done to our HR department and to Chief Floyd for going through that process. It's a lot to do. The other thing we really did a deep dive of is the legislative priorities. That was brought to council a week or two ago, and there was one priority that needed some more information, and it's now been provided to the rest of council, and it's about the juveniles being interviewed by police with and the component of having to have them consult an attorney before being questioned. And it is led because of the way it was written, and then by the legislature and the RCW, and then how it's interpreted by legal counsel. It's become dysfunctional, and so we had a good conversation about how it is working in practice is not really the intent of it. So hopefully all of council will read it, and I think we'll have a further discussion council-wide when it comes to legislative priorities. But ultimately in practice, what at least we had in our discussion at a committee level was the fact that when you can't talk to folks underage, under 18 in a timely manner, then those incidents are then referred to a prosecutor instead of being able to figure out what's going on. So it's actually leading to more referrals for prosecution than is necessary. And so some of that tweaking should be further discussed by council. And that'll be a discussion when we have that topic come up.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements or committee reports that I may have missed?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
So I'm on the library committee, so we don't have too many meetings because everything's always running smoothly. But on Tuesday, we had our Sparkle the Elf come and do a pajama time reading. And my girls had a fantastic time. So thank you to Sylvia Maxon Library. Thank you to the whole library staff was there. We had Sparkle the Elf, also, as my daughter said, the newest council member, read a wonderful book. And then Watermark Books had books that were age appropriate for all of the kids that they got to open up and take home. So anyway, it was really fun, so well done. And it's just another kind of community event for the holiday season.
Great, thank you. All right. We are going to move on to item 4A, which is now a resolution 3141. This is amending City Council rules of procedure to limit public comment to matters specifically pertaining to the City of Anacortes. And I can either read the summary, or Mr. Walters, do you want to take it?
Sure. Obviously, this is in reaction to the public comments that we heard last week, and I think a lot of us had strong personal reactions to those comments. We can talk more about that later on the agenda, where we are scheduled to review our resolution on hate speech. But we also have the ability to regulate the public comment period. And when we're talking about regulation of the public comment period, we can't restrict comments based on viewpoint, but we can set bookends on what constitutes a disruption and what's relevant to these city council meetings. Our existing rules of procedure allow for public comment on any topic under the sun. And of course, we've heard some doozies, including a diatribe about wildfires in California, and of course, last week's comments that were apropos of nothing related to city business. The effect of our existing rule is to turn over 3 minutes of Channel 10 video of our council meeting time, of the audience's time, for individuals to speak about anything and to hijack the platform. I don't want to prevent people from speaking to us about items that are on the agenda. I don't want to prevent people from speaking to us about items that are not on the agenda. And council, over the last couple decades, has actually gone back and forth on whether you can talk about items that are on the agenda or not. I don't think we should be constraining either of those things. But I do think it's reasonable to say that if you want to give public comment to us, your public comment needs to be related to the City of Anacortes. So I propose this rule change that would change our rules of procedure to restrict public comments during the general public comment period to topics specifically related pertaining to the City of Anacortes. Obviously, comments that are during an agenda item are already constrained to the agenda item itself. If passed, this would go into effect immediately. People could contact us at any other time about anything else that they would like to talk to us about. They just wouldn't get 3 minutes of this platform to talk about unrelated topics. And it would provide the ability for the chair of the meeting to cut people off who are not here to talk about something related to Anacortes. And as we heard last week, are not even from Anacortes. The mayor last week had no ability to legally cut those people off. And this would provide that authority.
All right, that was a good summary, council. I think hopefully everybody had time to read it. We got it into the package on Friday.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
I mean, it's a pretty short and sweet proposal of a change. I want to reiterate the fact that having that additional public comment period for anything that's not already an agenda item, I think is beneficial. At least I found as a council member, and I think that the public appreciates things come up, it allows us to kind of hear it in a platform that whether it's street related or parks related or some event that has something to do with Anacortes is beneficial. But where it becomes a problem is when, yes, it's being hijacked. And so I think that this is an intentional way of saying we want this public comment period to be related to Anacortes, but I think in practice we have to be realistic that we would still need to respect First Amendment rights of freedom of speech, and that this could be sticky sometimes when it comes to enforcement. But I do think it's important that we state what our expectations are for public comment. So I am pleased with this simple fix, and hopefully it helps guide a more civilized public comment. And in reality, I think, last week we were here, and I would say that a number of those comments were not coming from folks that are community members. So that's all. I'm in support of this.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I am also in support of this. My question is actually relating to enforcement, and if that were to happen, is there the possibility for that to happen right now, a public comment? So could someone call and would that happen again, or would staff be able to cut that person off?
Well, I guess as the chair of the meeting is the one that would have to do that. And like Mr. Walters pointed out, essentially the only rule that we have is the 3-minute rule that we're able to force. This will allow the chair to make, again, there's still going to be a little bit of judgment call in there that this public comment is not related to business of the city of Anacortes.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
Nope.
I do understand that part, but I mean, if someone started speaking on public comment via Zoom tonight and went off on a complete and heinous tangent, does the staff, the IT staff, have the capability of cutting them off so people aren't subjected to that?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, there was some technical challenges with YouTube, our YouTube channel, as you may recall. We were able to cut those folks off during in the podium speaker, but not on the YouTube. So I think we've got that resolved technically.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick.
Thank you. I also want to echo the sentiments that have been shared so far this evening. This is an easy technical fix to put very specific phrasing in there pertaining to City of Anacortes business. I do feel like it still allows people to speak with us about their concerns related to parking or parking enforcement or generalized quality of life, things that they're seeing in town that we may not hear about until somebody else brings it up to us. I feel like having these rules and still allowing for general public comment makes us in this chamber very available to our residents that want to speak to us. So I also want to extend my thanks to the council member and the staff and everyone who's been involved in actually pulling this together. So if there is no further discussion, I would move to adopt Resolution 3141, amending Resolution 3094, City Council procedures to limit public comment to matters specifically pertaining to the City of Anacortes.
Second. Okay, I've got a motion by Ms. Hubick and a second by Mr. McDougall to approve Resolution 3141. Any additional comments? Mr. Franciak, take the vote, please.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And I will try to memorize the rest of the council procedures also and do my best as the chair. Okay, moving on, we're to 4B now, which is our regular public comment period, and this is the opportunity for any members of the public that wishes to address the council on anything that is not on our agenda. And I do have one member of the public that has signed up, and I have Terry Kylo. Anti-Semitic comments is the topic. And you have 3 minutes, and of course you know the drill, name and city you live in.
My name is Terry Kylo, and I live in Anacortes, just outside the city limits. I want to thank you, the City Council, Mr. Mayor, for all the statements this week about the anti-Semitic statements that were made last week. I have led 90 major public events in the last 10 years to counter religious-based bigotry, and I've had a couple of them where members of hate groups have come to our meetings and disrupted them. And it feels terrible, and there's been a couple times I didn't know what to do or say. So I want you to know that you have my heart and my compassion. Like, as I was watching the video this week, I could just tell, you know, kind of what do we do with this? So I appreciate that, and I also hope that my statements today will be okay under newly passed Resolution 3141. As a member of the Lutheran clergy, who were mainly silent, but also participated in a lot of anti-Semitic statements and allowed anti-Semitism to rise in Germany, I knew it was my responsibility to stand up against religious-based bigotry because we know where it goes. There was an old study done back in the 50s called the Robbers Cave Experiment, in which they found that all it takes to develop intergroup rivalry is to name 2 groups. And that the boys that were in the experiment began very quickly to speak poorly of each other and began to engage in raids and various other violent behavior toward each other. And it's critical for us as a society to recognize that there is in our society, in Western culture, tremendous sedimentary layers of anti-Semitic narrative that get activated when public leaders or people in public comment spaces say things like were said last week. And the way that narrative works, according to experts, is this: that Jews are falsely accused of being in control of everything, and they're falsely accused of empowering people who are minorities to attack and oppress people who are in middle-class white Christians. Like, that's the way the narrative works. And those people last week were really engaging in that kind of narrative. And I appreciate that you all made the statements this week, and that it seems logical to me that you would reduce statements and this public comment to statements that are about the jurisdiction of Anacortes. And I just appreciate the fact that you all stepped forward. And I just felt I needed, as a Christian person, to step forward tonight and stand with my Jewish neighbors who've had about 2,000 anti-Semitic violent acts in the last 2 months. And to note as well that our Muslim neighbors have received almost the same, even though they make up only 2% of the population in this country, each of those communities. So as a Lutheran Christian, I felt the need to speak up for both communities tonight, but especially for our Jewish neighbors, and I'm appreciative of all the work you've done. When we had those people come to our events, we didn't know what to do, but we learned. That's what you all have done. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. All right. Any members of the public that didn't get a chance to sign up, maybe walked in late here? I do have one online, hand raised. It's Caitlin Blair. And please state the city that you live in and your name, please.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. My name is Caitlin Blair. I live in the city of Anacortes in the Skyline neighborhood. And I just wanted to make a comment as an active community member and child care worker. And I ask that you work on passing a resolution in support of a ceasefire in Gaza and Palestine to prevent further loss of lives and to prevent a larger humanitarian crisis. Today in Bellingham, Washington, the City Council unanimously passed a ceasefire resolution. If you, as the City of Anacortes City Council, were to pass or work on a ceasefire resolution, it would be adding to those demanding the call to action to end the genocide. I urge you to prioritize the protection of all civilians by respecting international humanitarian law and preventing further loss of life. I know we have a shared value that all people deserve to live in safety and in freedom, and I want my Palestinian neighbors to feel safe enjoying what our city and our town has to offer as they travel and they live here. I appreciate this opportunity to speak and share today, and for the safety of our neighbors, and I hope you consider a ceasefire resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. One more time here. Okay, we are going to move on to item 5, which is our consent agenda. Items 5A and B. Council, it's your pleasure.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. McDougall.
move to approve consent agenda items A and B.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Ms. Hubick to approve consent agenda items A and B. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are on to item 6A. This is a public hearing, and this is a public hearing for the 2024 operating budget. And we've received a couple of comments that we've taken in, and oh, you're already up there, Mr. Steppen. Any additional written public comments that we received?
Not that I have received, no.
Okay. All right, and this is, we've had this public hearing open for a while. Again, I'm not foreshadowing whether council's ready to pass the budget, but I think we've had the public hearing open long enough, and without any objection, I will close the public hearing on the 2024 operating budget. And that gets us almost to the budget discussion, but we do have an important item on the agenda, item 7A. And this is Resolution 3142, 2023. This is a joint resolution reaffirming equality and inclusion. This is a discussion item with possible action. And since this is a joint resolution with mayor and the council, I will go ahead and read this resolution. And I will start with, whereas the city elected officials passed Resolution 2060 on October 28th, 2019. Whereas the current city's elected officials want to formally reaffirm their commitment to this policy. Whereas the city's elected officials recognize the following principles as fundamental and true to the values, unity, and hospitality found throughout the Anacortes community. We understand that every person should be measured by the content of their character. The inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness belong to all people equally. We expect all individuals to be treated fairly and to be allowed to live their lives with dignity, free from mistreatment and targeting. We firmly reject and condemn all acts of racism, harassment, intimidation, and other forms of bullying. We firmly reject and condemn, as contrary to our values, acts of hate speech, speech that attacks a person or group on the basis of race, color, ethnicity, ancestry, national origin, immigration status, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, mental or physical ability, economic status, housing status, social status, system of belief, practice of faith. We believe that the clear and noteworthy spirit of our community as a whole is welcoming and kind, richly diverse, and warmly accepting of everyone, locals and visitors alike. We are committed to maintaining Anacortes as a welcoming, safe, and just community for everyone. We will continue to work in cooperation with our community partners to ensure that, consistent with the law, our services and programs are accessible and open to all individuals. And before I read the now therefore be it jointly resolved, I will stop there and turn it over to the council for discussion. And council.
Yeah, Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. So it's already been stated about the uncomfortable comments that were made at the last meeting. And I would say, as one of a handful of folks, council members who were there, I was completely rattled by that experience. And I went home and reflected on it and was frustrated with how I handled it, and it was a learning experience for me. I also was able to talk to fellow council member Hubick, and we really threw around ideas of how do we address that, since we didn't address it in the moment, and we have a policy of not responding to public comment, and I think I'm sorry, we don't have a policy, but we have a practice of not responding to public comment in the moment. But that doesn't mean we don't have the right and a responsibility to still condemn speech and viewpoints that are just hateful. So we talked a bit and went back to the 2019 resolution that was passed. There was quite a bit of work done. There was a lot of public involvement, including Mr. Kylo, who came and spoke today. We also included and talked to Council Member Carter, and actually the three of us were the three council members who were not on council at the time in 2019. We were all elected later. The current council members that are remaining were able to vote for this resolution in 2019, so the three of us felt like bringing it forward, reaffirming our support of it was important for the community to see. And then also beyond just confirming it is actively practicing what is stated there. So that's the reason we wanted to bring it forward. Then we talked to Mayor Miller, because we also had a different mayor at the time. And Mayor Miller was in agreement that this should be a joint resolution. So I think that's really powerful for our community to see that council and the mayor are in support of this, and we have work to do, and still a learning process. But when things are said like that, when there are viewpoints that are shared that are just divisive and cruel and untrue, we have to respect the First Amendment, but also stand up against it. So that's why we brought it forward, and I'm pleased that we had the support to do a joint resolution.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank council members Carter, Hubick, and Cleland McGrath for bringing this forward. It seems so fitting. I was one of the council members that worked on the original, and with Reverend Kylo and others, and thank you, Reverend Kylo, for continuing to advocate for peace and inclusion and equality everywhere you go. So anyway, I'm very proud of us as a city for doing this and repeating it, and we need to live it, and it's really important. And I'm glad to be part of a community where when people hear horrible things, they contact us and they stand up and they say this is unacceptable. So I do feel really glad to be united in this. So thanks.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, echo the thoughts expressed, and I think it's so great that Ms. Hubick, Mr. Carter, and Ms. Cleland McGrath brought this forward. Just the timing, and having not been on the original one, it's fantastic. I know that the existing council, we were proud of the work, and it was really great to have the input from particularly Mr. Kylo. It was really valuable. And we heard quite a bit from the community, so I'm really glad that this has been brought forth just immediately and that we're going to just reaffirm this. So thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick.
Thank you. To say that last Monday was rattling is kind of an understatement. I personally love my work here on council because I get to fix things. I'm not super good with handling feelings, and last Monday had a lot of feelings. So when we started speaking with council member Cleland McGrath, my brain just immediately went to like, how do we fix this? How do we stand up? How do we speak out against all of these things that we inherently know are wrong and are hateful and do not even come close to remotely resembling the values that we hold and that we want this community hold. So I really appreciate the quick work that we've all been able to put into bringing this forward tonight. I also want to reach out and say thank you to all of the community members who have messaged us and called us and emailed us, both with support and with love and with suggestions on how to continue to stand up for this. It is always difficult in the moment to figure out how to balance the kind of Robert's rules of order of being in council, regardless of whether it's in the chambers or it's on Zoom, but also finding ways to make sure that if someone's doing a history report in 20 years, that they look us up on YouTube or whatever, social media channel we have back and then, and just understand that this is why we do this. We love and we respect our neighbors, regardless of whether people are here for a few hours or for the rest of their lives. So again, thank you so much to everybody who was a part of this when it happened in 2019, and for everybody who's a part of it today.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I'm also pleased to support this resolution. This resolution is a promise, and the part that the mayor didn't read here is actually that promise, and that's to vigorously oppose all acts of racism, harassment, intimidation, bullying, and hate speech toward anyone. I think it's worth making that promise back in 2019. It's worth reiterating that promise today. But in addition to passing this resolution and reiterating the promise, we also need to do that work that we promised to do, and thus condemn the comments that were made at the last meeting on our air, on our YouTube channel, in our meeting. And the reason that those comments are a problem is not simply that they are hateful, but they were, or that they are offensive, and they were, but that they devalue people, a whole group of people. And when people hear that it's okay to devalue others, they find they can devalue anyone. And we know where that leads. History tells us where that leads. And we see it today as well. Now, these are moral judgments, not legal ones. Government mostly can't regulate speech and mostly shouldn't try, but we have an obligation to follow the constraints of the law and the Constitution. But we also have a moral obligation as community leaders to stand up for the bullied, the voiceless, and those that are injured by hate speech. And that's what this resolution really recognized. Now, I really want this time for the vote on this resolution to be unanimous and to include all 8 of us. I think that's very important, and a very important statement to the community that we are united in our diversity, but that we are united. So I wonder if we should not propose that we wait until Mr. Carter and Mr. Young can be with us to adopt it. I mean, I think there's value in adopting it tonight because it's immediate, but also there would be value in having all 8 of us vote on it. And I'd invite conversation about that point.
Well, you did take the dramatic, I was going to read the last part of the resolution when council passed it, but that's okay.
Right.
There are very important words in there, I agree. And I do worry about just because the holidays and people being sick and that kind of thing, it's been a while since we've had all eight of you or all 8 of us in the room together, but that's certainly up to council how you want to handle that.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I do like the idea of it being unanimous across the dais, and for the record to show that. Also, I don't think it will hurt to have it in the packet again and to emphasize it again. I think it bears repeating, so I'm okay with hopefully having us all there next week, whether remotely or in person, and all voting in unity.
All right, I'm seeing a lot of head nods, and that's fine. So anyway, the rest of the resolution for the public that may not have the packet is, now therefore be it jointly resolved by the City Council and Mayor of the City of Anacortes, Washington as follows. The City Council and Mayor declare it to be the policy of the city that our city is accessible and open to everyone, to vigorously oppose all acts of racism, harassment, intimidation, bullying, and hate speech toward anyone, and to provide equal access to our local government to all persons of our city. And then the rest is passed on the date it'll be passed, but we'll plan on bringing it back with the 18th as the date. Okay. Thank you for that discussion and resolution, and we will move on to item 7C. And I don't know if I can fill enough time for Mr. Stefan to make his way up to the podium, but item 7C is ordinance 4066, the 2024-2029 capital facilities plan. This is a discussion item with possible action. And then, of course, the companion is the operating budget. So again, got a lot of good inputs from council. A great thing and a little bit of a curse. The great thing is, you know, for the first time, certainly in my time as an elected in Anacortes, having a budget book prior to the end of the year, which is a really great thing. The curse part is it's a really big item and there's a lot, you know, there's a lot in there. But I do appreciate council's inputs on finding some of those errors and making some of those corrections, because it'll ultimately be a better product, and that's what we're looking for. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Stefan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council and members of the audience. Bringing back the budget for further review. And yes, thank you for your input. Council and public has emailed me directly, and I've made some edits. Mostly, yeah, I'll go through them. So we'll look at the budget highlights and specifics. We'll look at the CFP changes, the budget corrections. I'll come back later for the unified fee schedule. That's at the end of the agenda. We had discussed this already. It's come up several times. I'm just going to show you again. And on my previous presentation, I did not include the 5 police and 8 fire FTEs. Those are also new for this year. So this is the total list. In further detail, the new positions for the 2024 budget. This was brought up as a comment. In the budget book, there's a table that shows revenues, and it's somewhat confusing because the 300 level numbers are actually referring to part of the account number. This is a state specified number for the type of revenue. And so beginning fund balance is essentially the amount that we'll be using from our savings, the amount of money that is our spending is above our revenues. And if it's a negative number, it's the other way around. So I just wanted to point that out. And it looks like in general fund, well, there's a big fund balance spend. We're using a lot of money in general fund as well as in the sewer fund, both of which have debt funded or previously received grants that we had budgeted for, right? So for the FEMA money for the outfall project, for example, that money shows as a fund balance spend in the sewer fund because it was previously budgeted already, and that budget is not on the expense side this side around. I'm not sure if I explained it. I think there's another slide on it too. 333 indirect federal grants. That has a significant decrease in the revenue side. It's from 2023 to 2024, and that's these two. We had budgeted the revenue for the 30th and our roundabout as well as the sewer outfall for 2023. Those revenues are not budgeted for 2024. Fund balances, as I mentioned, fund balance used, the amount of spending that is more than the revenue. And I've linked the OpenGov report. It's on our city website for the public to see. There's a view that's called fund balance used. I left this slide in here from last time. It was a point of interest for several. This is essentially the amount of money, $962,000, that we have not yet spent if we were to allocate 1.8 million every year since council directed us to do that on overlay spending. wasn't able to complete the whole steps to create this construction fund this year, but we will do so next year, creating a fund that will essentially hold those funds and will contribute 1.8 million to each year. And then the balance in that fund will be easily able to see how much we've spent compared to how much we were planning to spend. Since the last, so this is again just a review of the changes that we have made to the budget. The 400,000 in the CFP for the EIS, the Grimace Channel Trail. I added the existing facility inventory. In the budget, we removed 400,000 because we are it's now in the CFP. Removed 10,000 from the HR budget. And in the budget packet, we've added the FTE count page. It's a summary of total FTEs. It might sound confusing. The 400,000 is in the budget ordinance. It's just not in the operating budget book. I hope that was clear and where we've shifted it from the budget book to the CFP book. But the final budget ordinance that I'm asking you to pass tonight is a total spend, which includes our operating and our capital amounts. So the total ask includes the 400,000 for the EIS.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Mr. Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason that is significant change is because in prior years, you were including that in the budget ordinance and the spreadsheets that we saw. Is that right?
I'm not sure that I understood your question.
You weren't splitting out capital before.
So the budget ordinance does include a combination of the total, but yes, in previous years, the budget reports did not include a column for capital and operating, which they do now.
I just want to highlight that as a significant change in presentation for council, which has some benefits for us, but it maybe makes things a little bit simpler in some ways, but maybe a little more complicated in others.
Correct. Yeah, when you're looking at, for example, the combined budget report on OpenGov, the 2023 column is significantly higher than the individual 2024 columns because it's combined capital and operating. And then if we look at 2024 budget, there's a column for operating and a column for capital. Unfortunately, I can't create a combined column in OpenGov that shows the total of those two. So some of the corrections that I've made since the previous meeting, in the CFP, page 5, there was a sentence that said that we review the CFP every 2 years. It is actually every 1 year, and so that's text is edited. Page 11, I added the fund numbers to the totals by fund chart. And I will point out too that some of these changes are not in the packet that was published on Wednesday since these came in throughout the week, and I haven't republished that document.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Steffen. One of my questions was that on that page 11 with the total, the fund numbers, did you add the fund names too? Because the numbers were there from 001 to 501 on the top part. We can talk about this later too. I don't want to take up extra time.
I'm not quite sure I understood your question.
Okay, so on page 11 of the CFP, sorry, I have two different packets here, but page 11 of the CFP, there's a total by fund year to year. And it lists the fund numbers. I'll wait till you get there.
Suppose I should have pulled up the packet as well.
Has the numbers but not the names of the funds?
Right.
Yeah, I see that in my packet as well, so.
Okay, I was hoping that
Oh, I
at some
see.
point the names could be added next to the numbers.
Yes,
My guess
absolutely.
is it's a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet got cut off is my guess, but.
Yeah, so I guess I misunderstood that comment. So there was a page before that, maybe that had the names but not the fund numbers.
Yes,
But-
there was one of those too. Okay,
Okay, I will correct the other one as well. So we have fund numbers and names everywhere.
great, thank you.
Several corrections in the budget document. On page 81, there was an example of the bond naming convention, and the text said 2020. It should have been 2022. On the debt summary, the outstanding debt, it showed that we had a 50% interest rate for the Public Works Trust Fund loans. It's actually 0.5, formatting error in Excel. Page 83 updated the table to show the 2023 required reserves, corrected spelling of the cemetery. Page 92, corrected spelling as well on that org chart. And then on the bottom of page 111, there was a incorrect percentage for the wage table.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I just want to say, Mr. Stefan and the entire finance department, how, I mean, I know these are these corrections aside, and thank you for doing them, but the way everything's been presented this year has been so much more useful to me as a council member, in the clarity of the information, the way it's presented. It's just been much easier for me to understand, and even to help see what some of the things that might need correcting. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because it's really made a difference. I think we're really on a great track here, especially, you know, I know the challenges of OpenGov, so good job with that in the mix of doing as great a job as you've all done.
Appreciate that, thank you. So those are the highlights of the budget book and the CFP book. At this point, we can discuss, or I can try to answer any additional questions that come up. But I believe that the budget ordinance is ready to be passed the way it is, and I assure you the corrections to the budget book and any further ones that we find will be corrected and published.
Council, questions for Mr. Stefan?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
I would like to echo some of Ms. Moulton's comments. I think specifically, though, having the budget book in advance of adoption is very valuable for us. I'm not sure how many council members had seen the budget book ever before, because if it isn't presented to us prior to adoption, how much need do you have to go back and look at it, a document that's prepared after adoption? So I would certainly encourage us to continue on the course of preparing the budget book prior to adoption, so that we can see the budget policies that are in it, so that we can see the brass tacks of the spreadsheets that were pretty difficult to interpret when we're looking solely at OpenGov. One change that I would make to the CFP is something that has come up a number of times. And that is that the CFP itself, which is 45 pages and the view that you've prepared here, ought to be attached to the ordinance adopting it. That didn't happen last year, except for after the fact. I think it's been a couple of years that we have to insist that the document is attached to the ordinance. We're amending the comprehensive plan. We should have for sure and for certain the list of projects that constitute the CFP. So I would propose that we make that change to section 2 of the ordinance adopting the CFP, simply to say that the CFP is adopted as shown in Exhibit A, and then attach it to the ordinance. As I say, we kind of got that done last year and kind of didn't. We talked about that at the bench. We passed it that way, and then it didn't make its way into Laserfish right away. It ought to be part of our template. That the CFP document itself is attached as Exhibit A to the ordinance.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
That seems reasonable to me, and it should be not too hard to attain. It is nice to have everything together and accessible for people. I am wondering, there's an item in the CFP that I have questions about that I'd like to discuss with the group, if this is the time to do that.
This is as good a time as any.
Okay, great. So it's a fiber project, and it's Highway 20 light manufacturing corridor within city limits, for a total of $3 million, over 2025 and 2026. I am not in favor of having this in the CFP. I don't see the benefits to costs that I am seeing here. I feel like that should come out with $3 million. We're spending a lot of money on fiber, which is great. And inside the city, I have not been presented a compelling reason for us to spend $3 million on doing the light manufacturing, out to Highway 20. I mean, maybe someday, but I just think we have more pressing needs in a lot of other areas of the budget that I would leave that one out.
Council, any other thoughts on this one? Mr. Walters.
I agree with Ms. Moulton on that. I mean, I think that there could be some value in leaving it in the CFP for the purpose of pursuing grants. But I also think that we could recharacterize it or add a description of the thresholds upon which we would actually spend city taxpayer money in the amount of $3 million over 2025 and 2026. I think that we probably would not do that. And if it were grant funded, that'd be great. But I don't want staff to get the impression from the inclusion of the project in the CFP that they are good to go with all the planning that would be necessary in order to pursue that in 2025 and 2026. We've talked about this, I think, before, and I'd be okay pulling that out. And we could then rehash it if we needed to put it in the CFP for some future grant that we thought had a reasonable chance of paying for that whole thing.
Yeah, I think the capture of what staff, the logic behind it was, should some grant opportunities come up, but also if that does happen, we could certainly bring it back to council and say, okay, this opportunity, I don't think there's anything identified yet. Ms. Shu,
Mayor
did you
Miller?
want?
And thank you. So yes, when we presented this as part of the CFP package, it was really intended to have it as a placeholder, with the understanding that we would do some preliminary design work in 2024 to be able to give us a better sense of what the actual cost is. This number is really just pulled out of the air, and it needs some additional information and backup. It would allow us an opportunity to do some of that additional design work to be able to bring forward an additional clarification about that area.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, that geography, I understand, is going to be one of our less customer-dense geographies, so the cost to acquire and therefore the ROI on that project is probably not as good as some of the others, so I'm not opposed to pulling it, although definitely support the like doing the design and scoping effort, say sometime next year, just to get a sense for what the real number might be should we actually choose to go forward. So but whether that means we pull it from the CFP or not is, I'm fine either way.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath and then Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. You know, this was one item that I had marked that I wasn't sure if I wasn't going to be the person to bring it up for the capital facilities plan, but the sentiment from Councilmember Moulton and Councilmember Walters is similar to how I feel about this. You know, this is one of those projects we need to, it's been a big benefit for our community to have access to fiber, but we also need to be realistic that we need to finish the project and redirect our kind of extra assets to other pressing needs in our community. So I'm not inclined to move forward with adding fiber in this area because I think that I don't want us to get like the cart before the horse. If it's one thing to get a grant that's helpful, but I also don't want to receive a grant and then realize that it's going to cost us millions of dollars in addition just to be able to use a potential grant that will cover a portion of it. So unless there's a real reason why we think we want to continue forward with it, I'm inclined to remove it at this point.
Ms. Moulton.
Thanks. I was just going to say that we know, even though the number was pulled out of the air, that it will be millions of dollars. So I don't know that I'm not certain that doing the design, I mean, I don't know how much design work costs either, but I guess if that's already a part of the budget, that's fine with me.
Yeah. So yeah, you think if we scope it, the odds are we're not going to find out it's only going to cost us a couple $100,000. I think that's
Exactly.
I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so I think I heard from majority of council to remove this $3 million guesstimate out of the capital facilities plan. Okay.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
And I think the real reason to do that is because we don't have any mechanism in the document we're adopting here to indicate projects that we're unsure about versus ones that we are sure about. I would expect that removal of the Highway 20 light manufacturing corridor from the plan doesn't foreclose the possibility of us pursuing it, but it also doesn't explicitly say to staff, here it is, it's adopted, it's endorsed by council, go for it. Whether design work can fit into the existing budget, I think, is the important threshold as to what gets done in 2024. And I would note that there's no design work in the CFP for this project in 2024. So that would be other funds other than these that are programmed here. In addition to that project, and it sounds like we've all weighed in on that to the extent we want to, I would also remove the $3.5 million for the City Hall seismic upgrades. I'm not finding that on my packet right now, but I know it's in here because I saw it earlier. As we've talked about, that number doesn't reflect current prices. It also doesn't reflect the scope that we would need. It was simply a seismic upgrade grant that the city went after a number of years ago. The need of City Hall to be upgraded for seismic and for fire protection is significant. We shouldn't ignore it, but we haven't gotten new numbers from staff on that. So I would take that out so that we are not endorsing a number that is just plainly not related to reality.
I'm looking for other council members' input. I see one nod. Okay. Yep, we got a majority of council with that. Any other comments?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
one of the items was the fire department elevator replacement, and when I read the notes, seems there's a question from staff if we want to replace it or decommission it, because without decommissioning it, we might be in violation of L&I rules. So it seems this might be a time to talk briefly about that, but I'm in favor of decommissioning that elevator. The city hall one, obviously, it's an ADA, it's an accessibility issue where I don't think it's the same for the fire department. So, I would just put that out there for staff to, that, I mean, and, you know, with whatever other council members think about decommissioning that fire department elevator.
Yeah, that's staff's interpretation as well on, certainly can't decommission the one here, but it is possible to decommission the one in the fire department, although there's a small amount of risk there as well. But if that's council's desire, that's fine.
And that's for $275,000 for people that don't have it open right in front of them right now.
Mr. Walters.
Yeah, I concur. I don't know what decommissioning costs, you know, what that price tag is, but it's surely got to be less than almost $300,000.
I've seen the number. I want to say it was 18,000, might have been 8,000, but it was not the 250,000.
Right. So I'm supportive of removing that if we are fairly confident that we can do that and be in compliance.
All right, I get head nods as well. Ms. Cleland-McGrath.
Yeah, so last week I brought up about the Guimas Channel Trail EIS and having that in the capital facilities plan. And I guess I'm a little confused why it would just be the EIS for $400,000 in 2024. To me, it should be the Guimas Channel Trail because there's going to be phases, I'm hoping, beyond just 2024, that study, but also some money, funds allotted to actually get to work on implementing and building and acquiring easements between 2025 and 2030 or whatnot. And there's no real detailed explanation for the public. So I think that needs a little bit more clarity. And then also, by contrast, we've got the Guimas Channel Trail Phase 3 Shannon Point, which has $50,000 for 2024, $150,000 for 2025, and then $600,000 for 2027, with really no explanation. So to me, those are two pretty important components of the same project, different phases, but a connection. And so I just think that there needs to be some more explanation, and hopefully some more funding allotted to the trail for the next 5 years.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
That was the thing that jumped out to me as well, as that $800,000 for the Shannon Point section. And I'm not sure how that became more of a priority than the other sections that aren't listed there, or if it even is. But yeah, I would like some clarity on that. And to my mind, $800,000 would be better spent between the Washington State Ferry and downtown. So I don't know how we address that exactly, but I would like to.
Yeah, I think Mr. Rayum is coming up to help us out with understanding this back and forth of WashDOT funding and where we think we might have some opportunities with the Shannon Point Trail. Mr. Rayum, thank you.
Set up for him. Hello, Andy Rayum, Public Works Director. So a couple of things. We have 2 grants right now from the state of Washington. They're both legislative appropriations. One of them is for that specific part of the trail that Mrs. Moulton, you were just talking about. So that's the 750, 800,000 number. The other one we have in the pipeline is currently in the state budget for $3.5 million, and it's not specific to any one portion of the trail. It's just basically get it done type of amount. And We've requested the state to move that up to 2024, and we're still working on that with them. We're waiting for a response, and that was also to help with the EIS as well as kind of get some momentum going on the trail in response to the council's interest in making some progress. So I don't know where that noise came from. Sorry.
Mr. Walters?
So on this particular line item, I was going to just let it go, but given the information Mr. Aum just provided, I am surprised to learn that the city has a grant for the portion of the trail that travels through Western's property. That is, I think, nobody's priority in terms of portions of the trail that we want to get done next. I don't know how we would have gotten that legislative appropriation and how it would have escaped our notice. Also, the other portion of the of the federal or state grant money, rather, for the EIS is critically important to pursuing the parts of the trail that everybody does think are the most important, which is getting it back to town. So I don't have a problem with the $50,000 that is programmed for the Shannon Point section in 2024, but I don't know what the funding source is for the $600,000 out in 2027, and we also don't have easements or permissions through that section at this time. I'm very perplexed about that particular project. I agree with previous council members' statements that the Guimas Channel Trail is itself the project. The EIS is a necessary component of permitting the project and planning the project, and it probably makes more sense to have all of this together as a single project, maybe a single project with components. But I do think we want to see, maybe in future CFPs, all the components of the Guimas Channel Trail laid out and its total cost, and the EIS should help inform that. Also, if we don't get this grant money that Mr. Aum just mentioned for the GCT EIS, then I think what we ought to have understood is that we are still programming the expenditure here of $400,000 in capital for the EIS. And if we don't have the grant money, then we have other funding sources available, like Parks Fund balance. We talked about that a little bit in the Finance Committee meeting last week. We don't budget for the revenues, and so we don't have to say specifically where that money comes from, but we know where it is. And if it's not, if it doesn't appear from the state, from that grant, then we should have other options and we should still get it done.
Yeah, staff has heard loud and clear from council that we want to get the EIS going, and that is definitely going to be the priority. Anything else to add, Mr. Aum?
Nope, I just thought I'd help try to get some clarification there around at least what the state records have told us about what grants are supposed to do what, so.
But as far as what's written in the budget right now, we typically, I think we have grant thing, and certainly we can, what if the rest of the process, if that doesn't come through, which Mr. Walter's suggestion would be Parks balance.
Yeah, I'll hand that one to finance. I'm not good on the revenue side.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
To Mr. Walters' point, maybe we could look into that, because I am really surprised to hear that we would get that much money from the state for the Shannon Point section. I mean, we're looking at that $750,000 altogether. So maybe at a Public Works Committee meeting, we could talk more about that or explore that in more detail sometime soon. Because it just doesn't seem like it belongs in the CFP the way it is right now.
So am I hearing from council, I realize it's not a priority, but I get that from council, but am I hearing that Shannon Point shouldn't even be on the list?
I guess not. It's just weird that it's the only thing there, I think.
Well,
I'm curious what other council members think.
Sorry. I think the idea is that it's public, it's a Western Washington, it's public property, so it's a matter of negotiating with another public entity as opposed to easements with other property owners. I think that was the logic, and maybe Mr. Lunsford can help me out with that.
The button. Mayor, council, ladies and gentlemen. So to give you a little background, in June, July, when we were putting these budget items together, Mr. Holman was here, and we were talking about money that was going to come, we thought at that time, to help us with our connection along Puget Way to Shannon Point. And so because the money was specified, you'll remember, in 3 different chunks from the legislature back when Mr. Morris and Representative Litton were in the legislature and directing the money to the Channel Trail, it came for 3 different sections. That's how it was delivered to us per their budget line items at the legislature. So that's how we designed it. Now, if Mr. Rayom is successful, we're able to kind of bring that together into one, then we can bring that towards the areas where council wants to direct us for the Channel Trail. But at the time of the writing of this, it was focused on the west side because we thought we were going to get that money imminently for the west side, Puget Way access into Shannon Point. That was the connection. So that's why the budget was written that way in the CFP. That's pretty much it. If we want to change that now, that's fine because we have new information and we can do that. Is that helpful? Okay.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath and then Mr. Walters.
So just for clarity, have we received that money or is it still being programmed for the future?
Mr. Rayom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're trying to get that delivered to us in 2024 in the lump sum.
The 400, but I guess I wasn't aware that there was a 600. So can you expand on the 600?
I'll do my best. Okay. At one time this summer, we believed we were going to get $700,000, Mayor, more or less, right?
I thought it was 750, but you know,
Thank
why
you.
not add a new number to try to confuse us all?
It was around that amount, and we're looking at funding the EIS with that and some improvements to the Puget Way to connect from the park up to Shannon Point. That was the discussion at the time. The money did not materialize in the legislative session, but the footprint is still in the CFP. Is that helpful? Yes. Okay.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
So initially my question was the same as Ms. Cleland McGrath's. Do we actually have the money? I think what I'm hearing is we do not have that money. I'm okay with spending $50,000 on the Shannon Point section, especially if we have the grant money in 2024. The out year amounts, we're not specifically authorizing them yet, so we can revisit this, especially when we have more information informed by the EIS. But I wouldn't prioritize that section if we don't have the grant money. If we don't receive the grant money, I wouldn't spend $50,000 from some other source for that section. I'd invite conversation about how to make this clear in the document that we're about to adopt, though.
All right, we'll put Mr. Steffen on the spot to invite him to try to make it clear, especially since we don't all have the numbers exactly right.
Okay. So the way I understood the discussion was that since the 2024 amounts include the 400 and then the 50 for the kind of the 2 studies or planning phases, this CFP is correct or good to move forward with. For future years, the council is not authorizing this exact spend that's in the CFP. It's the idea and the plan moving forward. Also, future CFPs should include more detailed information and more segments of the Glamis Channel Trail. Did I understand that correctly?
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton?
would it make sense to just have it say Glamis Channel Trail and we don't have to list the phase or Shannon Point? I mean, could that just sort of imply that wherever we can do it, we'll do it? Do we need to be that specific?
That suggestion is, I think, very helpful because we're not sure where we're able to do it right now. I mean, that's the rub. We know we can do an EIS. We
Correct.
don't know we can build the trail wherever we want to because it's owned by other people.
Yeah, and I would agree, Ms. Moulton, as Mr. Lunsford pointed out, when the state representatives are allocating money and working on our behalf to get that money, it's helpful for them to have a specific project to point to in our CFP and say, look, this is exactly what they're working on. This is what I'm working on. They mesh. I believe that's why it was structured that way. And again, things move quickly and things change over time, especially since it takes a while for us to get to this point. And that's one of the difficult things with the CFP, I think Mr. Walters pointed out. It doesn't only include projects that we are planning to do because we need to do them. It also includes projects that we would like to do and that we would like to find the money for. And certain granting agencies require us to have a project in the CFP in order to receive even a look at our project to decide if they want to bring us money for that. And so that's why we include projects in the CFP that we don't have the money for, but we would like to do, so that when they are funded, then we can move forward.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick?
Thank you. I think one of the things too that maybe hasn't just been explicitly said, so I went online and I found the CFP that was done back in 2021, and it was broken down by budget type. And so once upon a time, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 were all under transportation. And now one of the phases has been broken up into a parks line item. So I feel like that may be just one of the things that's been different from the way it's always been done. So like, I understand where everybody's coming from, but it also, I do believe, helps to keep things labeled possibly for consistency. Like if we need to go back and look at stuff that has happened over the last several years, we understand that we're looking at phases 2, 3, 4, or something completely different. I mean, I understand where everybody's coming from, but things have changed over the last several years, and I would prefer to keep it as consistent as we possibly can.
Oh, did I recognize somebody else before? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Ms. Cleland McGrath, sorry.
No, thank you. So a couple of things that you're trying to clarify. What I heard, and my opinion would be that if we have limited funds coming through, first priority is the EIS for $400,000. Second would be the $50,000 towards Shannon Point segment. So if we're trying to prioritize, to me, that's where where it would break down. I'm inclined to leave the 2 items, as Ms. Hubick says, just for consistency from year to year. But I think it also just reinforces the importance of doing this EIS. Granted, I also, though, want to clarify that at least at a committee level, the discussion was that the EIS would only address from the Washington State ferries east. So it won't even actually address the whole Shannon Point segment. So combining those in the capital facility plan does seem problematic, right? If those are actually 2 separate projects that are under this umbrella of connectivity, right? Multimodal connectivity and transportation. So I guess my thing is I would prefer to see the table that lists Parks, Squamish Channel Trail, EIS, remove EIS, and then put the fact that in the description on the columns on the right-hand side say 2024, 400,000 towards the EIS. Future years will be determined based on the information that's provided in that study. Because we could put $3 million or $10 million or $15 million across those future years, and we really would have no concept at this point. So at least that, having that note for the public and for council and the mayor when we go look at it next year and we've forgotten it, it will indicate what our intentions were at this point in time.
Thank you, that's very clear.
We like that, clear guidance. All right, any other thing that jumped out for council? I feel like we have a little bit more tweaking to do.
Mayor
Although,
Miller?
although I certainly would accept a motion to adopt, but I feel like we have a little more tweaking to do. Mr. McDougall.
Just a kind of a quick procedural question, as I'm a parliamentary amateur. Mr. Walters had made a statement earlier about the basically attaching the CFP to the ordinance. Is that a motionable thing that needs to be seconded, or just a request? And I guess that's perhaps a question for Mr. Walters.
Mr. Walters, you want to try to answer that?
If we're going to bring it back next week, I would just suggest that staff edit it in the next couple days to include that line. The line simply being the City of Anacortes comp plan is hereby amended to adopt the capital facilities plan attached as Exhibit A.
All right, and I'm looking at my smart staff that we think that that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, they're telling me it shouldn't be an issue, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you.
Okay, well, then that tells me we're bringing this back from any changes, but please let us know, because we're getting down to the wire, but we'll bring it back next week. The budget and the capital facilities plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good discussion. All right, we are on to item 7E, which is interlocal agreement with Skagit County for the 2024 Senior Services Program. This is a discussion item with possible action, and I'm sure this is Mr. Lunsford because he's already standing there.
Mayor Miller, Council, good evening again. So this is an annual interlocal that we received from Skagit County to help us. We pay them and they pay us. So it's to take care of the facility in a whole and serve the citizens and guests who come there. And our requirements and responsibilities are spelled out there. And also we receive money from the county and they do the Meals on Wheels, et cetera, and the meals, the congregant meals in the center. So this year, the slight difference is you'll see an uptick in both numbers. This year, we're receiving about $104,000 from the county, and we're paying a little over $43,000 to be specific, $43,750. So that's a small increase in that amount on both ends. So not much else has changed in the language from what you passed last year, but this is just an annual formality that we go through with Skagit County for the funding of the partial funding of the center. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or try to, that you may have.
All right, questions for Mr. Lunsford? Mr. Walters, is that you? Sorry,
I was going to bring this up in the context of the budget, but I guess you took CFP and budget together. But in the revisions to the budget, we've added quarter time or something like that to the senior center admin coordinator position. But in our finance committee meeting, I think we determined we didn't plus up the parks budget. I don't know what the delta is, but I've heard that it's maybe $10,000, and I would like us to make that change as well, especially because we deleted that other $10,000 as noted in the budget presentation. Seems like we've got that money.
yeah, thank you for that. We were planning on doing that.
Good.
Any questions on the interlocal that's before you now?
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Hubick?
Thank you. I do not have any direct questions. I do want to tell staff, thank you for all of the good work that this program does. I had some opportunities over the summer to actually go out with the volunteers that were doing the Meals on Wheels. And it's a fantastic program. It helps some of our most vulnerable people in the community. I would make a motion if there aren't any further questions to authorize the mayor to execute interlocal cooperation agreement 24-021-ASC-001 between the city of Anacortes and Skagit County for the 2024 senior services program.
Second?
Okay, a motion by Ms. Hubick, a second by Ms. Moulton to approve the interlocal agreement with Skagit County for the 2024 Senior Services Program. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac?
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is item 7F, Resolution 3140, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Anacortes updating unified fee schedule. And Mr. Stefan is coming up to explain that it's not every fee schedule, but he'll give that background, and then Mr. Lunsford's here to answer any specific questions.
Yes, thank you. So the unified fee schedule is adopted by resolution by council. The CPI increases are already approved, and we would not be discussing this today if that was the only thing that was changing on it. But we are adding the Parks Department depot fees to this unified fee schedule. Along with that, there's a slight increase to those fees to be more in line with competitive and other facilities in our area. We discussed this at CFC last Wednesday. From that discussion, I did make a slight change to the table. Happy to pull that up. Just pull it up so we can look at it. So right here on the bottom part of this page is the Depot Arts and Community Center fee schedule effective 1/1/24. These are per hour or per day rates for these specific parts of the facility. These are the capacity numbers just as information for those looking to rent this facility. All of the room rentals require a $100 or $500 deposit depending on use. And this language here is what was currently in the flyer that we've been using.
All right, any questions? And of course, Mr. Lunsford's here to answer any specifics about those changes.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I did have a couple of questions earlier by email for Mr. Lunsford, and he answered those about the fees being very reasonable, even with the increase and in line, and costing less than similar facilities around the area. So that information is available. And I move to approve the resolution 3140 to adopt the updated unified fee schedule.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. McDougall to approve resolution 3140. Any additional discussion? Mr. Walters.
Just a thank you to Mr. Stefan for making that change in the presentation. It looks a little different in the packet than how he put it on the screen just now, but the presentation on the screen is clearer, easier to read.
All right, Mr. Franciac, take the vote, please.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. Being no further business before the council, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.